Hello, my dear friends. Hand waving. Thank you for being here today. Your time and attention mean the world to me. If you love heartfelt, inspiring stories about grit, hope, and chasing impossible dreams, please subscribe. It helps us keep going. I wish you a wonderful listening experience. This moment is for you. Now, let's begin. Glowing star. His name was Nate Ritsenko, and he fell in love with boxing before he knew what footwork was or why hands belonged near a cheekbone. He was 7 when he first shadowboxed his reflection in a bus window, a kid throwing crooked jabs at his own ghost. By 13 he'd memorized the way television commentators inhaled before a knockdown. By 16, he'd filled 2 notebooks with scribbles, combinations, drills he lifted from videos, quotes he copied from champions like spells, hands high, chin down, breathe when you punch. The problem wasn't desire. The problem was the chorus. His uncle laughed. You're too quiet. Find something steady, his mother said, eyes tired from long shifts. School, a trade, boxing is for the lucky few. Even his friends didn't see it. You, a fighter? They'd smirk. Come on, Nate. You won't even argue with the math teacher. It wasn't cruelty, not really. It was a kind of safety people practice without realizing they're building cages. Nate nodded, filed their words under noise, and went looking for work. If no one would invest in him, he would invest in himself. The restaurant. The Bluefinch wasn't blue. It was a narrow, yellow-lit bistro wedged between a laundromat and a locksmith. It smelled like garlic and ambition. They hired Nate at 16 because he said yes to every shift and because the manager, Marta, had a soft spot for kids whose shoes squeaked with newness. He started in the dish pit, hands in hot water, apron heavy with the day's plates. The world measured his work in stacks, dirty to clean, full to empty. He liked that. It made sense. At closing, he'd swipe a corner of the prep station, flip a 5-gallon bucket upside down, and sit to change his socks. The cooks talked in a language of heat and urgency. He learned it without trying. Behind. Hot. All day. He learned that a kitchen is a fight that keeps its gloves on. Footwork around bodies, timing, rhythm, a kind of brutal grace. He also learned to count money in minutes. $10 an hour meant 1 hour of bag work at the gym across town. 2 hours meant wraps and a bus pass. 8 hours meant a month of membership if he haggled. He told himself the math was a combination, and every shift another rep. When the last table left, the bartender turned up the TV. On some nights the channel was boxing by accident. Nate would pretend to mop near the screen, absorbing angles like you absorb sunlight, shoulders dipping, a feint that made a world open, a counter right that looked like a decision. Don't you sleep? Marta asked once, catching him staring at the 10th round past midnight. Later, he said. Later is a liar, she said, but she smiled. The gym door. The first time he stepped into Southside boxing, the air was the sound of leather making decisions. Speedbags rattled like rain. Jump ropes cut perfect circles in dusty light. Men and women moved like they'd bartered hours for grace. Nate didn't know the owner yet, Coach Vale, a man whose shoulders looked like they'd argued with gravity and won. But he knew the smell. Old tape, new hope. Membership? The girl at the desk asked, bored and kind. Can I try a day pass? He asked, feeling suddenly like his voice belonged to someone smaller. $15, she said. He counted 2 5s and 5 1s, money still damp from dishwater. She stamped a date on his wrist. He didn't look at the stamp because thinking about time made it shrink. He wrapped his hands the way he'd seen in videos. It felt like a ritual and a promise. He kept the tape neat because neat made him brave. In the mirror he saw a kid whose ears were a little too big for his head, whose eyes kept searching for permission. He gave it to himself. His first round on the heavy bag taught him why people mistake noise for work. He hit hard and messy. The bag swung like it knew better. A man in a faded USA boxing tee watched him for a minute, then walked over. You got wind, the man said. No aim. Nate froze. Yes, sir. Call me Vale. Hands up. Elbows in. Turn the fist so the knuckles land, not your thumb. Vale held the bag still with a palm. Again. But this time, breathe. Nate jabbed, exhaled, felt his shoulder line up with his hip as if a door hinge had finally found its pin. Something landed inside him too, and for the first time that day, he didn't notice the clock. After 3 rounds, his arms felt like he'd borrowed them from a stranger. After 5, he couldn't lift them. After 7, his heart learned a new shape. The bell, an old bicycle bell wired to a timer, rang like mercy and law. Vale handed him a jump rope. 2 rounds. Then shadow box. Slow. Slow? Slow is how you learn where your feet end and your hands begin. Nate obeyed. He was good at that. But obedience turned to hunger when he saw how the rope taught his ankles to whisper. He missed 15 times. Then 10. Then 5. He didn't celebrate, he filed it under work. On the bus home, he cradled his hands in his lap. They trembled with exhaustion and attention. He looked at the stamp on his wrist and smiled like a thief. Doubters and dishes. I'm happy you're exercising, his mother said that night, practical even in praise. But school, Nate, and your shifts. You need to think about nursing or plumbing or something that becomes money. This becomes something, he said. What? Bruises? Discipline, he said, wishing the word didn't sound like pleading. At school, teachers told him his essays were better than his grades. Friends told him to come out on Friday nights and he told them he had work, which was true and not the whole truth. Work, and then the thing that made the work mean something. When he did tell someone, I think I want to fight, they laughed gently, the way you laugh at a kid who says he'll be an astronaut. Cool, they said, good cardio. Or, just don't get hit in the head, bro. Or, that's dangerous. You? Really? He smiled and bussed tables. In the dish pit, he shadowboxed the steam, barely, just enough to feel like he wasn't wasting minutes. The line cook, Tino, a man with forearms like rope, caught him one night. You box? Tino asked, sliding a pan into the sink with a hiss. Trying to learn. Good, Tino said. Everybody needs one fight they choose. He flicked water at Nate. Don't let it be with your mother. They laughed. It felt like permission too. Training by inches. Coach Vale didn't praise so much as confirm. That jab was honest, he'd say, which made Nate stand taller than good job ever could. Or, you wasted your feet on that cross, which sounded like scolding and felt like an invitation. Days took a shape. School, shift, bus, gym, bus, shower, sleep that arrived like a collapsed tent. On Sundays he did laundry and wrote in the margins of his notebooks. Hands up even when bored. Roadwork equals church. Don't chase respect. Build it. Roadwork, to Nate, meant the slow miles at dawn. He laced up cheap trainers and jogged along the river until the city became rhythm. He didn't care about pace. He cared about showing up when no one could see. At the Bluefinch, he learned prep. He learned how if you dice an onion right, you won't cry. He learned that a sharp knife is safer than a dull one. He learned that you can love something and still be tired of it. Between lunch and dinner rush, Marta let him hang a beat-up heavy bag in the alley, on a bracket the handyman swore could hold a truck. 15 minutes, Marta said. Don't scare the neighbors. He set a timer on his cracked phone, tied his wraps tight, and worked basics. 1-2, 1-2 slip 2, pivot out 3. He whispered the numbers into his breath, as if they were prayer beads. Sometimes Tino watched from the back door, nodding when the pivot made the bag obey. Keep your chin in your scarf, Tino would say, meaning tuck it. See, coach, Nate would tease, and Tino would laugh big enough to change the weather. The first spar. It happened because everything in gyms happens. Slowly, then all at once. Vale eyed him after bag work and said, you learn by seeing. Now learn by feeling. I'm not ready, Nate said, which was true and always true. Headgear, Vale said. Mouthpiece. Light. Listen more than you talk. His sparring partner was Luis, 18 and already composed. A kid whose eyes didn't blink when a glove waved hello. They touched gloves like a promise. The first 30 seconds, Nate forgot how to walk. The next 30, he remembered how to run, with his head. By the end of the first round, he'd tasted leather and humility and adrenaline's electric lie that says you are either everything or nothing. Breathe, Vale said, wiping a thumb under Nate's eye where the headgear had pinched skin into a bruise. You're not drowning. You're excited. That's all. Round 2, Nate jabbed first. It touched air. He jabbed second. It touched Luis's forehead like he was knocking on a door. The door opened with a counter that kissed his cheek. He didn't fall. He learned to smile with his teeth closed. After 3 rounds, they hugged in the way fighters hug. Gloves on shoulders, sweat and respect trading places. You're strong, Luis said, casual and sincere. You're smart, Nate said, clear. Be both, Vale added, like a third man in a conversation that had room for truth. Nate showered at the gym, put his damp clothes in a plastic bag, and caught the bus smelling like work plus hope. On the ride, he texted himself, first spar, not dead. Bring ice. Then he fell asleep with his head against the window and woke at the end of the line to the driver saying, kid? Last stop. Saving and starving. Boxing is cheap until it isn't. Headgear, gloves that don't betray your wrists, shoes that grip canvas without stealing your knees, tournament fees, physicals. Money hides in every bell. Nate split tips with the waitstaff when he ran food. He grabbed extra shifts when someone's cousin had a birthday. He sold a game console he barely used. He stopped buying takeout. He ate family meal like an athlete and like a thief. Grilled chicken, plain rice, extra broccoli if the sous chef looked away. One night, Marta caught him scraping sauce from a pan after close. You feeding a ghost? She asked. I'm saving for gloves, he said. Eat, she said, putting a plate in front of him. Then save. He ate in 3 minutes. He saved in 3 months. He bought gloves that fit like he'd been shaking hands with them in his sleep. The plan. 6 months, Vale said, pointing with his chin toward the bulletin board where Golden Gloves flyers lived. You can get your first amateur bout by then if you show up like a man who knows what days are. What days are? Nate asked. Currency, Vale said, and excuses. Spend one, not the other. They built a plan with boring bricks. Roadwork 4 days a week, strength twice, bag and drills always. Sparring once or twice if his head stayed clear and his feet did, too. Nate kept a small ledger in his phone. Mon. 3 miles, jab ladder, 8 rounds bag, abs. Tuesday. Shift double. Alley bag 3 times 3, footwork squares. Wed. Spar 3, slip rope, cool down. 2. Off, stretch, study fights. Fry. 2 miles, mitts with Vale 5 rounds, shoulder rehab. Set. Work lunch, gym, film 1 round for notes. Son. Laundry, cook rice, sleep. He put sleep in all caps because it was the first thing stolen. When his friends texted, come out, he'd write, gotta crash. When his uncle called his dream a phase, he'd smile and say nothing. When his mother left a pamphlet about trade schools on the table, he tucked it into a drawer he labeled maybe later and felt guilty for not opening it again. Every time doubt knocked, he did jump rope. It wasn't a cure. It was a rhythm you could hold onto while the boat listed. When no one believes, disbelief slides in quietly. It's the aunt at dinner who says, when will you do something real? It's the coworker who jokes, don't you get punched enough in the dish pit? It's the way a friend's eyes glaze when you talk about pivot steps and they hear obsession instead of craft. Nate learned to answer with hours. He learned that you can love people and not take their advice. He learned that sometimes the loneliest place is halfway between who you've been and who you are trying to become. Once, on a break, he stood in the alley under the hook where the heavy bag lived. Snow fell like quiet disagreement. He wrapped his hands inside his hoodie sleeves and worked slow air punches against cold air. Tino cracked the door and stuck out a steaming paper cup. Tea, Tino said. Because you look like a monsoon. Thanks, Nate said, grateful for heat and witness. You got a fight yet? Tino asked. Soon, Nate said. Good, Tino said. I want to scream at a ref for the first time. They laughed. Inside, the ticket machine spat orders like a snare drum. Outside, the city exhaled cold. In between, Nate kept moving. The girl at table 4. It was a Thursday with the kind of rain that made the sidewalk look like stained glass. The bistro filled early, umbrellas dripping, laughter fogging the windows. Marta moved like a conductor. Nate ran plates and water, and the idea that this, too, was practice. Balance, pace, eyes everywhere. At table 4, by the window, sat a girl with a book and a wide, unbothered smile. She ordered soup, then a second tea. When Nate refilled her water, he noticed the title, Unboxing, by Joyce Carol Oates. Its dog-eared pages a secret handshake. You like it? He asked before fear could shush him. She looked up, eyes curious. The book or the soup? Both, he said, and immediately regretted it. The soup is a 10, she said, amused. The book is a 9 until she talks about myth and makes me want to shadowbox metaphors. He laughed, surprised at himself. Do you, watch fights? I grew up on them, she said. My dad and I yelled at the TV together. Now I yell at my laptop. She grinned. Why? You a fan or a fighter? Trying to be the second, he said, heartbeat in his ears. That's brave, she said, not like a joke. Might be dumb, he said. Most brave things look dumb to people who don't do them, she said. She slid the book toward the edge of the table as if offering it to gravity. I'm Lena. Nate, he said. I'm, Nate. Nice to meet you, Nate, she said, smiling. Good luck with the thing that looks dumb and is brave. Marta shouted, runner, and the moment folded back into plates and orders. But when Lena left, she tucked a bill under the saucer and scribbled on the receipt, good luck. Hands up. Next to it, a phone number, like a bell that meant many things. Nate slipped the receipt into his pocket near his wraps, where belief had been hiding, waiting for company. The promise. That night, after close, Nate strung the heavy bag and worked quiet in the alley. It was late enough for the city to pretend it was asleep. He jabbed and stepped, pushed and pivoted, breathed like the bell was the sky and the bag a planet he'd been assigned to steady. He thought about Lena's smile, how it hadn't carried pity. He thought about Vale's hands, steady on the bag, about Tino's tea and Marta's stubborn kindness. He thought about his mother's fatigue and his uncle's laughter and all the ways disbelief tries to look like love. His phone buzzed. A message from Vale. Saturday, 3 rounds with Luis. Bring your legs. He texted back, yes, coach. Then he hit the bag one more round, just to make the yes feel like a real word in his mouth. The rain thickened. The alley glowed. Inside, the dish pit waited with its honest work. Outside, the gym door in his head stayed open, the bell warm and near. Nate wiped sweat with his sleeve, untied his wraps, and whispered a promise to the dark, 6 months. No shortcuts. One fight at a time. He didn't know yet how the first bout would feel, or how long the road would be, or how many nights he'd spend trading sleep for rounds. He didn't know how Lena would fit into that road, or how victories collect quietly and then suddenly rain. He only knew the next small truth. Show up. Breathe. Hands up. Chin down. Again. Hello again, my dear friends. Glowing star. Welcome back to part 2 of Nate's story. Before we continue, I want to thank you for listening, for supporting, and for sharing these moments with me. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It truly helps us keep telling stories that inspire. And remember, this time is for you, so make yourself comfortable, relax, and enjoy. Sparkling Heart. The first real rounds. Saturday came heavy with nerves. Nate stood in the gym lobby, headgear dangling from one hand, trying to look like he belonged. Lena had texted him good luck with a fist emoji. He stared at it twice before slipping his phone back in his locker. Luis waited in the rain, gloves already tied, bouncing on his toes. Coach Vale leaned against the ropes, eyes patient but sharp. 3 rounds, Vale said. Work. Don't die on me. Nate climbed between the ropes. His legs were jelly. He touched gloves with Luis, and the bell rang, a sound both too loud and too final. The first punches came quick. Nate blocked late, swung wild, missed by feet instead of inches. His lungs betrayed him. His thoughts shouted louder than his coach. But somewhere in the mess, a jab landed. Clean, solid. For a second, he wasn't drowning. Vale nodded once, barely. That one was yours. Now build on it. By the 3rd round, Nate's arms refused to rise. Luis touched him at will, but not cruelly, just enough to remind him boxing was more than courage. When the bell rang at last, Nate bent over the ropes, chest heaving, vision spinning. Vale patted his back. Good. You didn't quit. That's the only thing I can't teach. Nate sat on the stool, sweat dripping onto the canvas, and thought, this is what I want. This exact feeling. Alive, tested, unfinished. Balancing 2 worlds. Life became a careful juggle. Restaurant shifts, gym rounds, and whatever energy scrap school demanded. At the Bluefinch, Marta noticed his tired eyes and shorter answers. You working too hard, kid? She asked, stacking receipts. I'm working towards something, he said, wiping down tables. Then make sure the work makes you, not breaks you, she said. On nights off, Lena sometimes stopped by the bistro. They talked between tables, quick bursts of conversation stolen from orders and trays. You ever fight in front of a crowd yet? She asked once. Not yet. Soon. She grinned. I'll bring popcorn. He laughed, but inside he felt a new pressure, the good kind, the kind that says prove them right. The routine. Weeks folded into each other. Mornings began with roadwork. 3 miles by the river, sometimes 4 when his legs agreed. He'd watch the sunrise paint the water and think about rounds, not miles. Every step was a bell. Afternoons meant school. He wrote essays about perseverance without telling the teacher he was really writing about jabs and footwork. Evenings belonged to the restaurant. He carried plates with the same care he carried combinations, steady, balanced, precise. And nights ended at the gym, where Vale drilled discipline into him. Don't fall in love with power, Vale barked during mitts. Fall in love with accuracy. Power's a guest. Accuracy lives here. Nate repeated it like scripture. Bruises and believers. Doubt didn't disappear, but it changed shape. His mother still worried, still left brochures for steady careers. His uncle still teased, but others began to notice. Tino started calling him champ in the kitchen. Marta rearranged shifts so he could make sparring nights. Even a few classmates stopped smirking when Nate showed up with swollen knuckles wrapped under tape. You really do this? One asked. Every day, Nate answered, not bragging, just telling the truth. Lena came to watch sparring once. She sat quietly in the corner, notebook open, eyes focused. Afterward, she handed him a bottle of water. You look alive in there, she said softly. I feel alive in there, he admitted. And for the first time, he didn't feel silly saying it. The test. One evening, Vale pinned a flyer to the gym board. Local amateur showcase 3 months away. He pointed at Nate. Be there. You're ready. The words hit harder than any punch. Ready? Nate wasn't sure. But when he looked at the flyer, he saw more than paper. He saw years of dishwater shifts, alleyway training, roadwork at dawn. He saw Lena's belief, Marta's patience, Tino's jokes. I'll be there, Nate said, steady as a jab. Vale's face gave nothing away, but his nod meant everything. A spark between rounds. As training intensified, so did Nate's connection with Lena. She visited the gym more often, sketching in her notebook while he worked the bag. Sometimes they walked after practice, sharing stories under streetlights. Why boxing? She asked one night. Because no one believes I can, he said. Then let me be the first, she said, smiling. Something shifted in him then, a warmth beyond ambition, a reason bigger than proving doubters wrong. He wanted to fight not just for himself, but for those who believed when it was hardest. Closing Part 2. The showcase loomed closer. Training grew sharper, rest rarer. Nate's knuckles toughened, his body hardened, his will sharpened like steel. Yet beneath all the sweat and bruises, a spark of love began to glow, something he hadn't expected but now couldn't imagine living without. The bell had only just begun to ring. Hello again, my wonderful friends. Hooray! Thank you for staying with Nate's journey. Before we jump back into the story, I want to remind you, your support means everything. If you enjoy these stories of dreams, struggles, and triumphs, please like, share, and subscribe. I wish you peace, strength, and joy as you listen. Now, let's continue. Sparkling Heart. The countdown. 3 months felt like 3 minutes. The amateur showcase poster haunted Nate's locker, its bold letters staring back at him like a dare. Every road run, every round, every skipped night out now pointed to that date. Vale turned training into war. Hands high. Tighter. Again. Don't drop that elbow. Again. Shadowbox slower, make every step a choice. Again. Nate's body screamed, but his will stayed silent. Between rounds, Lena sometimes read her notes out loud. Your jab is sharper. Your footwork's cleaner. You're not chasing anymore, you're dictating. Her belief fueled him more than protein shakes. The restaurant that never slept. At the Bluefinch, Marta gave him fewer late shifts, though she never said why. You'll thank me later, she smirked. Still, Nate worked enough to cover his fees, gloves, and a mouthguard that didn't feel like chewing on concrete. When coworkers teased him, "Champ, knock out a plate of fries for me." He laughed, but inside, pressure coiled tighter. He couldn't fail now. Too many people had invested belief, even if it was just in jokes. Sparring that hurt more than punches. Luis was no longer the only sparring partner. Vale brought in tougher kids, some heavier, some faster. Nate took bruises that bloomed like maps across his ribs. One night, a left hook dropped him to a knee. His vision blurred, and pride begged him to stay down. Vale crouched beside him. You hurt? No, Nate lied. Then get up, because the bell don't care. He rose, legs shaky but alive. The sparring partner grinned. Good, you've got heart. Now show me you've got skill. Nate survived the round. Barely. But when the bell rang, he raised his gloves anyway, and Vale's rare half-smile meant more than applause. Doubt returns. The night before weigh-ins, doubt crawled back. He stared at himself in the mirror of his small bathroom, gloves slung over his shoulder, face pale with nerves. What if I lose? What if everyone's right? What if I'm just pretending? His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Tomorrow's not about them. It's about you. Step in the ring and find yourself. I'll be in the crowd. He exhaled slowly, wrapped his hands, and whispered to the mirror. Tomorrow, I fight. Fight day. The gym smelled of sweat and nervous energy. Amateurs of every size taped wrists, stretched, shadowboxed in hallways. Coaches barked instructions. Families waved posters. Vale checked Nate's gloves. Remember. First round, establish the jab. Don't brawl. Box. Yes, coach. When Nate's name was called, his chest tightened. He walked toward the ring, heart pounding like the bell itself. He climbed the steps, ducked through the ropes, and for the first time, looked out into the crowd. There, Lena, standing, clapping, smiling like belief itself. The referee brought them together. Gloves touched. The bell rang. Round 1. Chaos. Pure chaos. The opponent, a stocky boy with fast hands, stormed forward. Nate panicked, backpedaled, blocked high, felt leather slam against his guard. Breathe, Vale shouted. Nate jabbed. Once, twice. The second one landed. He exhaled. The storm slowed. He began to see angles. Step right, jab. Step left, cross. By the end of the round, sweat dripped, lungs burned, but he wasn't drowning anymore. He was fighting. Round 2. This time, Nate pressed first. His jab carved space. His cross snapped like a whip. The crowd roared when a clean hook landed. The opponent sneered, came back harder. Nate slipped a punch, barely, and countered with a right hand that shook the air. Vale clapped once. That's it. Own the ring. Round 3. Final round. Everything a blur. Nate's arms felt like stone, legs like sand. The opponent kept coming. Nate kept answering. Both boys refused to break. The bell rang. The fight was done. The decision. They stood center ring, gloves down, sweat dripping. The referee held each wrist. The announcer's voice boomed through cheap speakers. And the winner, by split decision. Pause. The world held its breath. Nate Ritsenko. The referee lifted his hand. The crowd erupted. Lena cheered. Vale nodded. Tino whistled from somewhere in the back. Nate's chest filled with something bigger than victory. Proof. Proof that he belonged. After the fight, in the locker room, Vale patted his shoulder. Not perfect, but real. You're a fighter now. Lena rushed in, ignoring the rule about family only. She hugged him tight, uncaring about the sweat. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he said. That night, Nate lay awake in his tiny room, gloves still beside him. His body hurt everywhere, but inside, a fire burned. He had won his first fight. He had tasted the bell, the crowd, the moment. And though the road ahead was long, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Hello again, my amazing friends. Glowing star. We've come to the final chapter of Nate's journey. Thank you for listening, for believing in these stories, and for being here with me. If you haven't already, please subscribe and join our community. It means the world. I wish you strength, courage, and inspiration as we finish this story together. Now let's begin. Folded hands boxing glove. After the first victory, Nate's name was on the board now. He wasn't just a dishwasher with bruised knuckles. He was a fighter with a record, 1-0. For weeks, the gym buzzed differently around him. New kids asked him questions, Luis slapped his back harder, and even Vale seemed less stingy with words. Good start, Vale said. But don't get drunk on one win. Boxing is a long road. And it will test you harder than life already has. Nate nodded. He already knew. The grind deepens. Work didn't stop. Bills didn't disappear. He still carried plates, still counted tips, still scraped dishes late into the night. But now, every bruise on his ribs had meaning. Every sore knuckle had proof behind it. Marta started calling him champ, unironically. Tino brought him ice packs wrapped in bar towels. Even customers whispered when they recognized him from a local paper article. Local teen boxer wins debut match. It wasn't fame, but it was fuel. Love in the balance. Lena and Nate grew closer. She walked him home after late training sessions or sat with him in the quiet after sparring, writing in her notebook while he iced his hands. You're building something, she told him one night. Brick by brick, punch by punch. Sometimes I'm scared the wall will fall, he admitted. Then I'll help you hold it up, she said, squeezing his hand. It was the first time in years Nate didn't feel alone in his dream. The fall. Victory brings new opponents. 6 months later, Nate stepped into the ring for his second official bout. The fighter across from him was stronger, sharper, hungrier. The first round went badly. Nate ate jabs like medicine he didn't want. The second round was worse. A hook rattled his jaw, his knees buckled, and for a moment the canvas felt like gravity's prison. Get up, Nate. Vale's voice cut through the haze. He rose at the count of 8, gloves trembling. The round finished, but he knew. This wasn't his night. The decision was unanimous. Nate lost. The lesson. Back in the locker room, silence pressed heavier than bruises. He threw his gloves down, ashamed. I failed, he muttered. No, Vale said. You learned. You stood up when the world told you to stay down. That's boxing. That's life. Lena knelt beside him, eyes fierce. Do you think anyone wins forever? This loss is part of your story. Don't erase it. Nate nodded slowly. Pain gave way to something sturdier. Resolve. Rising again. He trained harder. Smarter. He studied film, run longer miles, drilled defense until slipping punches felt like breathing. He learned humility. Not the kind others forced on him, but the kind that made him sharper. When he stepped into the ring again months later, he fought with patience, precision, and hunger balanced by control. And he won. Not just once. Again and again. His amateur record grew. His name carried weight in local circuits. The boy who washed dishes was becoming the man who built his own destiny. Giving back. But Nate never forgot the restaurant alley, the first bag, the people who believed before it was easy. On weekends, he began teaching kids at the gym, kids who, like him, had no money but endless fire. Boxing isn't just fists, he told them. It's discipline, respect, belief when no one else has it. Some listened, some didn't. But every time he saw a shy kid throw a jab with pride, he felt something bigger than victory. The future. Nate wasn't famous. Not yet. But he was real. He had a record, a dream, and a woman who believed in him. He had sweat and scars, but also hope and a story. One night, after roadwork by the river, Lena walked beside him. "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" she asked. "In the ring," he said. Then he smiled. "But also outside it. Coaching, giving back, making sure no kid feels like they don't belong." She nodded. "That sounds like a fighter. And a man." Closing the journey. Nate lay in bed that night, gloves on the shelf above him. He remembered the boy throwing jabs at his reflection in the bus window. The kid who nobody believed in. The dishwasher who boxed in alleys. The young man who stood up from the canvas. And he whispered to the dark, "I'm still fighting. I'll always fight. Because dreams don't belong to those who never fall. They belong to those who rise again."